Um, Fantastic. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the kind introduction, Kanishka, and for the invitation to the panel. I'm structuring my contribution more or less along the three questions that were outlined in the panel description. So what is the central problem of the research topic I'm working on? And that is climate change, which will trigger massive changes in the Earth system, global warming around 3 degrees until the end of the century, which will lead to more droughts, more extreme weather events, and also sea level rise. Just to give you a frame of reference, in most parts of Australia, climate change will, if no additional safety measures or building measures are conducted, climate change will send the coasts to retreat by 50 to 80 meters by the end of the century. So you can go to your favorite beach, put your feet into the water, look to the land, 50 to 80 meters, everything until there will be gone by the end of the century. And I think that illustrates the scale of the problem quite massively. And while mitigation of climate change by reducing CO2 emissions is crucial, it is not sufficient. Even if the whole world would stop emitting CO2 tomorrow, all emissions down to zero, some degree of climate change will still be locked into the atmospheric system and continue to go on for at least 20 to 25 more years. And given the scale of the problem, and given that it was obviously discovered by some of our natural science colleagues, the initial response to climate change was strongly structured and dominated by the natural sciences, by the big boys, as one of the previous contributors said. So the polar bears are dying. Where are our conservationists? Sea levels are rising. Where are our engineers to build the seawalls? Diseases like malaria are going to spread, and heat strokes are becoming more certain. Where are our doctors? Where are our epidemiologists? And my argument is that if we take this approach, there's two fundamental dangers or perhaps wrong directions we would go when talking about or considering climate change. And the first one is that climate change triggers such massive changes to the Earth system and to the natural environment that it would be naive to believe climate change would have no social or societal implications. And who would be better placed to study the social science implications of climate change than obviously social scientists, because engineers or epidemiologists know very little about them. Take, for instance, one topic of my research, the conflict implications of climate change. Imagine you're a poor farmer living in a country, say Philippines or Somalia or Bolivia, and you have a rebel leader is approaching you and asking whether you want to join the rebellion. And now perhaps you don't want to join the rebellion because, well, it's very dangerous. You might be caught, you might get shot. It's perhaps the wrong thing to do, and you can live very well off your farm. But then you have 1 year with a bad drought, and then the second year with a major flood, and then the third year with a bad drought, and all of a sudden you take your kids out of school, you reduce on your spending, you only eat 2 meals a day. All of a sudden the rebel leader approaches you again. You did not get any help from the government, you struggle to make ends meet. All of a sudden, it's much more attractive to join the rebel group. And that's obviously something that social science, it's not always that easy, that straightforward, but it illustrates you that there might be a risk or a danger that social and political scientists are very well versed to study. The same could be migration. Perhaps the farmer decides not to join the rebel groups, but he decides to migrate to the next urban area or to a country where prospects for living and earning an income are better. Again, that's something that is at the heart of social science research. The second danger I see is that some of the solutions that we consider or that initially were or are considered to be good solutions to climate change are, if not considered in their social and societal contexts, may backfire or prove ineffective. For instance, genius idea some people in biology and engineering come up with was, well, look, let's plant biofuels. Let's plant massive amounts of sugarcane, for instance, in Brazil, Then we harvest the sugarcane, turn it into biofuel, put it into our cars. The CO2 goes in the air, but is captured by the sugarcane that regrows. So voila, it's much better than the fossil fuels. So based on this technocratic approach, a lot of subsidies went into that. After a bunch of social scientists figured out that actually, well, where do they plant the sugarcane? They cut down the Amazon rainforest to plant the sugarcane, which obviously is a massive CO2 sink, turning now into a massive source of CO2 emissions. So it really backfires if you don't consider these kinds of context. Okay, how can this be managed, or how can this be overcome? That's the second question. And I'd say analyzing climate change, and particularly the security implications of climate change for human security, national security, and planetary security, require an interdisciplinary analysis with a strong social science contribution. For instance, the natural reaction to climate change and environmental stress is not always violence and conflict. There's well-documented examples all around the world where local institutions stepped up and facilitated cooperation to clean up after disasters or to share scarce resources. And these traditional institutions and their work obviously should be acknowledged and supported by policymakers. And the second example is that social scientists found out that migration actually, because initially it was conceived as all people are quite happy to live in their places and then climate change is displacing them and that's a major problem. But obviously migration can be an important adaptation strategy to climate change. So we live in a time with more extreme weather events. So if a family lives off a farm, sending one of their sons to an urban area to pick up a job there. So if he can't find a job, the family can still live off the farm. And if the harvest at the farm fails, the son in the urban area can still send some money back. It's actually an increasingly smart strategy to diversify your risk rather than putting all eggs in one basket. Social scientists have also found out, for instance, that quite often climate change does not contribute to migration, and at least not to international migration, because international migration is A, risky, but B, very, very dangerous, very, very costly, very, very expensive. So the farmer who has a drought in the first year might still consider to migrate to a faraway urban area or even to a rich country. But he says, nah, let's stay here, let's farm, perhaps the next year will be better. Puts in some of his assets to buy seeds, does a second year comes a flood, he does the same. Third year he decides farming is infeasible, but then he lacks the assets, the funds to migrate or to pay someone to smuggle him to Australia, let alone pay for a flight ticket and a legal visa application. So they might just end up to go to the next big town or village to seek some work there. So all the money we would put in border protection to fend away or take care of climate refugees is actually not very well spent. Because most climate refugees are either going not to be refugees ever at all or stay within their countries, and supporting them to adapt and cope within country would be a much smarter choice. So the broader insight from this is that all measures to mitigate, adapt, or prepare for climate change need to take social realities and contexts into account. For instance, to avoid community resistance, to make them conflict sensitive, or to bring them in line with local economic and cultural realities. And that brings me to answering the third question that Gary and Kanishka asked us to answer, which is, what skills or insights enable social science to make a difference? And I'd highlight 3 skills here. The first one is critical thinking. I know it's a very often used phrase, but we as social scientists, we are skeptical of simple solutions. Just build a seawall, just enforce border protection. Climate change will always lead to conflict. We know from historical knowledge and from global comparison that social relations are rarely straightforward and they require constant questioning and analysis. The second thing is deep diving. We can disentangle complex local realities and analyzing the importance of actors and norms and social structures, including through the anthropology work that was described earlier today. And we have a broad understanding. We do not just conceive humans as acting rationally and self-interested and always in their best interest. We know that norms, perceptions, emotions, prejudice, and so on play a key role in people making crucial decisions, including whether to get vaccinated or not, or whether to migrate after an extreme weather event or not. And that makes social scientists suitable for quite a wide range of important jobs. In my field, for instance, most government departments now have, most foreign policy government departments now have a climate security unit. Most UN peacebuilding missions have a climate security advisor. And these people do always come from the social sciences because they bring the skills that are required for these kind of jobs. So to conclude, and hopefully I'm a bit quicker than the time I was allocated. Despite originally being a natural science issue, social sciences has made enormous contributions to understanding and reacting to climate change, and that indeed shows that social sciences have a bright future. Thank you.